Hello, y'all. This is Luke, and I'm back with another episode of building a self-hosted analytics service from scratch. In the last episode, what did we do? We did some back-end work, in particular user agent parsing and basically storing some other analytics data as a precursor for being able to render that in the front end. We also created a mockup of what we want our front end to look like here. And today I think we'll be focused on building this. It's going to be a UI focused day. I think we have all of the data that we need more or less. So we can actually start implementing the mockup. Let's go ahead and run our stuff. So bun run dev server. We're going to build the tracker. And we're going to serve the demo app. Okie doke. So now if we go to localhost 3001, I think it is, we will see our dashboard server, and we can start iterating on that. Yep. Okay. So for starters, let's take a look at our mockup again. So we have some of the elements of this mockup already, right? We have the look back picker here. We have these visitors and visits tabs here. And we have this pages bar chart, I guess you would call it. It's not quite what we want to see though. There's definitely some improvements that could be made there. But we don't have the line chart. We don't have this My Site drop down at the top. And most importantly, we don't have the layout, the overall page layout matching what we have in this mockup. So I'm going to start with the page layout because that's going to give us the framework for designing everything else, right? And I don't really think there's a specific container type thing in ShadCN. Sometimes, you know, these CSS frameworks will have like a app container component, but I don't think there's one here. So we'll just do it ourselves basically. The main point of the layout here is going to be to constrain the width and center the content of the app in the page. So let's go ahead and do that. If we open the dashboard, I think, yeah, this app component. It's not letting me click on it to take me here. And then there's this home page component here, I guess. And we can go ahead and put our layout stuff in here. So we'll be using Tailwind for this. So we could say max width. Let's see, what's 2XL? 672 pixels. That's probably a little too small. What about 3XL? 768 pixels. And if we just, you know, there's no real change here, but if we actually look at this here, we can see that the max width is constrained to that, which is a little bit too narrow, probably. So let's actually try 4XL, see what that, 896. Also looks maybe a bit too narrow. Is 5XL like 1024 or whatever? Yeah, 1024. Let's do that. That's a good round number, pretty standard size probably. And then we can add margin or just M auto, right? And now that content is centered. So now we kind of have this centered layout. We can also add a little bit of margin at the top. Probably just 2, MT2, and we could do MB2 as well, just to give us some space. Yeah, like so. Might actually do a little bit more. MT4, MB4, something like that. Yeah. Okay, so now we have our layout here. And, you know, we decided that looking back at the mockup, which double click this to open it in a persistent tab. We have kind of this header at the top, right? Where look back is on the right and this drop down, which we haven't built yet, is on the left. So let's actually make that header here. So we're gonna have another div, and I could abstract this into a separate component, but not gonna do that yet. Maybe we'll separate out the components later, but for now, we're still kind of in a prototyping phase. Okay, so here, this will be probably the best way to do it is just a flex container. And then we can have a, you know, we're going to have our drop down, which for now I'll just do a placeholder, site name, and then the look back chooser. And I'm also going to have, I don't actually have this in my mockup, but, and maybe I'll just add it here. We'll probably want like a button here as well, which will be like settings. And I'll just do like an S in there. I'm actually going to put probably an icon in there, but and maybe I want that to the kind of to the far left like that. Oops. Let's group these together so that I don't have to select them both at once. We can do the same thing here, group these together. Okay. Something kind of like that maybe. So let's go ahead and put a placeholder for that in as well. In this case, we'll actually do the button though. Might as well. And then we can add an icon. But for now, I'll just call it settings. Okay, so now we can sort of have this going on. And I'll set this variant to ghost probably, which will take away the border and everything and just leave it kind of like this. Okay. So we want the look back chooser to be on the right. There's a few ways that we could accomplish this with a flex layout. Maybe one of the simplest, if a little bit hacky ways, is to just add a spacing component here. So like if I create something here and let's see, how do I do flex 1? How do I do flex grow in Tailwind? I don't know that. Let's just click on this and look for flex. So it is, okay, so it's just grow. Grow. Simple enough. And with that, I think that will move, yeah, the look back to the far right. So what we actually have here is we've got, you know, the button, the site name, this spacing component or element, and then the button. And, you know, looking at this, we can see that we want some kind of gap between these as well. So it looks like that would just be gap. And we can add that up here. So like gap 1, maybe gap 2. So now there's a bit of space between settings and site name. The other thing is you'll notice these are not really aligned like we'd like them to be, because they're aligned towards the top. And what we would really like would be for the elements to be, I think justify is the thing we're looking for here. Justify items, or justify content. No, so, okay, so justify is along the main axis. I always get these mixed up. So kind of what that means is, so like with flex here, you know, this is a row flex. We didn't explicitly declare that, but I think if you look over here, I don't know if it's going to say it, I guess, but it's like a row of elements. And the justify is along the main axis. So because this is a row, the main axis is the horizontal axis. Whereas I guess what we actually want is align, which is, I believe, the cross axis. Yeah, okay. And here we would want center probably, or baseline maybe would be even better, I think. Let's try that. Didn't really do much, did it? One thing I will also add is some margin here. So if we do like MB4 here as well. So now those are kind of, you know, there's a little bit of spacing there. So how could we get, so this, let's actually put in our real components here, and it might work a little differently. So we should get that in there before we do too much messing around with the alignment. And the component that we want here is a drop-down menu. Or no, really more of a select. I wonder if it's a separate thing. Yeah, select. This is what we want. This sort of thing. So let's add this thing. I don't think we have the select component. In fact, where are our components? Oh, they're in here. This directory is empty. Let's delete that. Yeah, no select. Okay, let's go ahead and install that. It's kind of taking its sweet time. Is this still the fitness app? No, actually the fitness app got wrapped up a few weeks ago. I've moved on to a self-hosted analytics app. Providing fitness analytics as a service. Well, that's your idea now, so I won't take it. But yeah, basically what we're doing now is kind of a self-hosted alternative to Google Analytics, Simple Analytics, $1 metrics, I believe it's called, where, you know, we have like a tracking script that you can add to your site, and then it's going to track information about the users that visit. And we're currently building a dashboard that's going to allow you to kind of analyze those viewers. Sort of the inspiration for this, I have a lot of self-hosted sites. And, you know, by self-hosted, I mean in the cloud. It's not like I'm hosting these in my house or something like that, but I manage the hosting. And I don't really like to have to send analytics data about my users to third parties if I can avoid it. I do use like a privacy conscious analytics service for my statically hosted sites, but I thought it might be fun to try building my own. Also, I've always been curious about how analytics actually works. It often seems like kind of a dark art to me to figure out like what's the user's browser, what's the user's, where do they come from, like geolocating their user, stuff like that. So kind of wanted to dig into it and see how it works. Your marketing team is struggling with GA4. All they want to do is check ad clicks to sign up conversion. They've never used analytics before. A paper company before. Wow. Paper company. That's rare these days. Yeah, I can imagine. I think that there's a certain element of analytics, like especially if you're tracking conversions or, sort of anything where you're correlating multiple user events against each other. Like you would say, well, the user visited the page, but then they didn't convert, or they did convert. In order to do that, you have to like correlate conversion events with visited events, right? And the more complicated your chain of correlated events that you're trying to check, the more complicated it becomes to actually make that work, it seems. That's actually not really going to be something this app supports. It's more going to be just focused on analyzing your visitors and like how long they spent on the page, stuff like that. But to actually calculate conversions and things like that is probably going to be out of scope because of how complicated that can actually be. And also, I'm trying to avoid too much tracking. So like we do track user ID, which is like a hashed IP address. So in theory, you could correlate events based on that, but there's no other, correlating elements. So GA4, you feel like you need to take a whole course on its own before you do anything productive. I can imagine. I have used Google Analytics in the past. It was many years ago, though. I always thought it seemed complicated. I'm sure it's only become more so since. This app probably isn't a solution to that. I believe I've heard, like at my company, I think we use Pendo, but it's also quite complicated. So you're probably not going to get much by switching. I'm sure that if the people are not familiar with analytics, there's just going to be a certain barrier to learn that no matter what tool you're using, or like I think Honeycomb Labs has some interesting analytics stuff as well that I've heard of. Honeycomb. But yeah, lots of solutions out there. This one's targeting more of the low end personal hosting stuff. But we'll see. It might actually end up with features like that depending on how I feel as we go. So let's add our select here. And I'm going to go over, just copy this. A lot of times with ShadCN, it's like you're just doing some copy pasting to get sort of the scaffold UI select, and then add all missing imports. Don't need that. Okay. Site name. So here our select content is going to be, well, let's just leave it at this for now and take a look at the UI, what we have. Yeah, okay. So now things are, they're nicely aligned. The baseline, in theory, I don't know if it actually matters, but this content baseline should be aligning the baseline of the text in each element with each other, which usually is what looks the best in terms of tracking with your eye. And what this is going to do is allow the user to select what site they're viewing the analytics for. So you could imagine if you have 4 different sites, you don't want to have 4 different deployments of an analytics app to track them, you know. And obviously, if it's a SaaS product like Google Analytics, it's like you don't want to have 4 different accounts, you know, one for each site. You just want to have one account or one deployment of Nanalytics in this case, and be able to view your data aggregated by different sites. And that's kind of what this is allowing people to do. I don't think I actually have a hook for this data yet though, so that's something that we're probably going to need to add. So let's do that now. So we'll call this use sites. And I don't think we need the app state here. And this is just going to be sites. And we will return API sites like so. And then we're going to need to implement that route on the back end as well to make this data available. Unless I did that already, I don't remember. Let's see. So server. Okay, so this is that server. Where's my dashboard server? I should probably know this. Where is my dashboard server? Oh, it's up here in the same file. Okay. You're trying to visualize the data. You've never done anything close to this, but it's like taking linked nodes and archiving them, then taking those and running them through frequencies. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So basically, I mean, the data model that I have at the moment, there's a table of events. And this is actually a SQLite database because I want this app to be easy to deploy and not depend on a separate database running on a, you know, like a Postgres database where we'd have to deploy that separately. So there's a SQLite database. It has a table of events. Every time the user visits a page, it calls this record route, which will create an event. There's also a finish route when the user leaves the page, which will update the event to track how long they spent on the page. And there's a no script GIF here, which is like, what was that? Oh, gosh. I just got a Steam notification, I think. There's a no script GIF here, which is like, if the user doesn't have scripts enabled, it will still create an event, although it's limited in what it can track at that point. Anyway, each of those events is associated with a site based on the host name. And then in the dashboard, you know, we aggregate those events. So like here we have events aggregated by visitor and page. So if we look, you know, at the last 365 days, all of the data, it's like you can see, well, that NA is actually, that's what, you can't see how long they spent on the page because it was, you know, the no script thing. So this was when I was testing the scriptless event tracking. And then down here, it's like this is a scripted event track, so we actually can see how long they spent on the page. But yeah, so there's a bunch of different aggregations that we want to add. I actually have kind of an example here in the mockup. These are sort of all the different types of aggregations we'll be doing. So by page, refer, hostname, device type, browser, and OS. And then all of those can sort of be done by either unique visitor or by just raw count of visits. And all that aggregation for this particular app is happening on the front end in the user's browser. The server is just serving up the raw event data. I do, you know, if somebody has a really high volume application with like an absolute crapload of events, and you also want to keep like a long history, you'd probably want to do write time server-side aggregation, similar to how Grafana or something like that works, where you can aggregate events And instead of storing the individual events, you just store the aggregate metrics. But that's a lot more complicated. So I'm not going to do that at the moment. But, for maximum event storage, that would be the way to do it. Okay. Let's just add a really simple route here to get all of our sites. And this would be get sites, get all sites. Okay, so now we have that get all sites hook here. And I'm using Tanstack query to define these hooks. So we can just now use this use sites hook in any component, and it'll be using either a cached copy of that on the front end, or if there isn't a cache or it's out of date, it's automatically going to make an API call to populate that. So let's put that up here. We could do like const data sites equals use sites and import this. And then here we could have, sites.map site select item value is going to be the site.id, and that this should be a different type here, site.id, and then this would be the site.name. And I don't know if I ever actually implemented a site name. So for now, this will just be the ID as well, but really we should be using a human readable name here. Okay, let's get rid of these select items. And then this, I don't know how this works. Do I set this to be like selected? I wonder how that works. So let's just take a look at what we've got here. So it's site name, and then you can pick the one. There's only one at the moment because that's what I'm using for testing. There must be a way to set the default value on this, but what is it? Select value. Is it just like a child of select value? Let's see if I just do sites 0.id here. Wonder what that will do. Let's do that. One of the things with Tanstack query, this sites is going to be undefined until the API call is done. So we kind of need to handle that undefined state. There's sort of two ways of doing that. One of them is you can do something like this, where it just won't have anything until there's a site populated. Usually the preferred way is you can check there's actually a loading flag on here. So, I could be rendering a skeleton here while that data is loading, and then render the actual UI once the loading is complete. But usually I don't like to spend too much time on that at the beginning. Okay, so that didn't seem to do what I wanted. Is it default value? I wonder. No. Doesn't seem to have done it. Maybe I should be looking at the API reference here. Okay, so this is bringing up Radix UI. Yeah, so let's see what it has to say for itself here. So there's value on the root of the select. So it's, oh, so it's up here, I guess. It's one of the things, a lot of times when you have all these components, at least for me, it's hard to know like which property goes on which component. Okay, so now we have the default, the current site selected. The problem is, you know, this value is going to need to affect other things on the site, obviously. Like if you select a different site, you would expect to see different data. And so we need to actually hook this up to a hook itself is probably going to be the way to go. And what I'm going to do is probably add it to our app state. So let's do that. We have this global app state here, which is where we store information that's going to be needed sort of across the UI. So we would say like site would be site, sure. We could do just the ID of the site, or we could put the whole site in here. It's pretty much the same thing either way. And site is going to be null to start with. Because we don't know what any of the sites are until that API request is complete. We can't really set a default value for this. Okay, so now in our homepage, we have our app state here already. So this value is going to be appstate.site.id. And, you know, we'll need to put a question mark here because it could be null, right? And we could, I mean, that's fine. I think that if that's not set, it's going to use this placeholder value, which is what we would want. And then we also are going to add an on change, on value change. And this is going to accept the value. And it's going to set app state. And we're going to set it, well, let's say, I'm going to say draft.site equals, maybe I will do it as an ID actually. I think that's going to be a little bit better. Site ID. Do I have site ID as a type? No, I don't. I might actually add that type. So if I go down here, I'm just going to export type site ID equals site ID. And this should be a string because it's a UUID. And sometimes I have like a specific type for UUIDs. I'm not going to worry about that at the moment though. Okay, so this is going to be site ID. And if we go over here, this is just site ID. Well, it's just site, right? Still. Yeah, like that. This wants it to be undefined, null or undefined. You know, I don't really have a strong preference there. We can just set it to undefined. No big deal. And on value change, new ID, draft.site ID equals new ID. Okay, so now we have this select that people can use to pick different sites. Let's actually create, I don't currently have a UI for managing sites. It's one of the things we'll need to add. But in the meantime, I just have some of these testing sites that are automatically created. I'll add another one here. which, you know, we'll just call this example.com. Doesn't really matter. And obviously we'll need a new UUID. Let's just generate that like this. Well, we could just do like require crypto dot random UUID. Put that in here. Okay, and then we'll need to restart the server to get that to run. So I think that's the first one here. Yeah, restart that. And then now there should actually be 2 sites. Yeah. And now what we kind of need to do is have something that's automatically going to set the default site ID. And probably the way to do that is actually in this home page here. We would say if sites and not appstate.siteid, appstate.siteid equals sites 0.id. And we could add like and sites.length greater than 0. So this is going to set that default value here. Kind of an interesting note. And I guess, oh yeah, we need to actually wrap this in a set app state call. Let's just clean that up. Okay. So one interesting thing here is like, and I don't pretend to be a total React guru, but I've spent a lot of time with React. In the past, I would reach for a use effect hook here, where it's like you would have a use effect hook, and then inside that hook, basically, you would have this logic. But I believe what I've learned is you don't actually need or even want use effect in this situation, because that will cause the site to render, and then the use effect hook will run after the render, and it'll set the app state, and then it'll re-render. So there will be a moment where it's rendered in the state where there are sites, but there's no appstate.siteid. Whereas if you do it this way, you know, it's rendering the home component. It's like, oh, we have sites and we have appstate.siteid. It uses setAppState. This immediately triggers a re-render right away. So it doesn't render in the state where appstate.siteid is undefined. Except obviously it will do that for a moment before the API request is done. But in any case, kind of the point is we don't need to use effect here. So, and as we can see, it basically default selects the first one. Okay, pretty simple. Now, the thing is we need to actually use this. So if I select this other site has no data elements associated with it, no events. So this stuff should become empty, but nothing actually is reading or using this. And so we need to fix that too. And luckily, it's not too hard to do that with our hooks here. So we have this use events hook. And what we can actually do is add another property here, appstate.siteid. And we'll put another query parameter here as well. SiteID, appstate.siteid. And so with this, you know, it's not actually going to change anything, but we can kind of see it happening here where we have a site ID selected. If I switch this, it's going to do another API call with the other site ID to populate that event data. Of course, because our backend doesn't know about this site ID parameter yet, that doesn't actually change the data that's being rendered. So now let's implement that up here. So this get all events function, I'm going to parameterize this based on the site ID as well. So let's do like const site ID equals this. And this would be site ID. And really, let's take this out of here too and do const lookback equals this. And so then this is going to get the site ID and lookback. And here site ID is going to be either string or undefined, let's say, because it's possible the parameter won't be set, and I don't really want that to be a required parameter. Or maybe I do. Maybe I will make that a required parameter, actually. Usually having required query parameters is not really a good idea. If something is required, it should go into the URL typically. So like this, for example. Or like API / site ID / events. And we could do it that way, but I'm not too concerned about this because we're not actually exposing this API for people to use. It's purely the dashboard that's going to be using it. And we'll actually just add a case here where we would say if not site ID, return response.json, and we're actually just going to return an empty array. So if there is no site ID, there are no events. That's the logic there. Okay, so back to our get all events here. So we have this site ID. Now we need to actually use this. So we would say like where site ID equals site ID and that, and then we add site ID as a parameter here. Like that. Okay, simple enough. So now if I switch this to this, we see some. If I switch it to here, there's none. Apparently these are in kind of the wrong order. There's no really good way to order those at the moment. But I guess this EDB one, if I look over here, yeah, that's the localhost 8000 one. So that's the one that should have the data. So that makes sense. It's unfortunate that that's not the one that's automatically selected though. Okay. One of the things too, like if I refresh this page, that state goes away. Now what's going on here? Invalid format UUID. What's going on with that? API sites failed. Invalid format UUID. Not sure. Let's check our data here. If we look at our sites, so what is this? Did I accidentally change that? Yeah, I accidentally deleted a 7. Okay. Not sure when I did that. And I moved it over here. Okay. Sure. Whoops. Let's go ahead and delete both of these. Seems that came back up. And then now that error should, oh, it's still happening. Oh, I thought I deleted this. Why didn't it delete? Okay. Okay, let's delete this one too, just to be extra sure we're doing the right thing. Reload the thing. It should reappear. And now, yeah, it works. Okay. Kind of weird. Anyway, I must have accidentally clicked and dragged that 7 around while I was just clicking around with my mouse. Okie doke. So now we've got that. We've got this settings button here. Let's replace that with a gear. Is there, I feel like there's some kind of like specific way to put icons in buttons. Is that a thing? Icon. Yeah, size icon is what you're supposed to have there, I guess. Let's go ahead and add that over here. Variant ghost, size icon. And then in here, we'll have like a cog icon. So now, yeah, it looks like that. And that doesn't actually do anything at the moment. I do feel like looking at it now, I kind of want it on the other side of the select. And I maybe even want it on the other side of the look back, actually, over here. Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. Okay. And what this is actually going to do is open a settings panel on the side is kind of the plan. So let's, I do want to add an ID for these sites, or a name, human readable name. So let's actually do that here. Like this, I'm also going to add name here. I'm going to add name here. And I'm going to give a name to each of these. Like this one will be localhost. Let's actually lowercase that. This one will be example.com. And what we'll also do here is add this to the schema. Name z.string. And maybe I'll do like a max length here. Or is it just .max maybe? Of 32, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but okay. And then what? So kind of the other thing I'm thinking about is the ordering issue. I would like these to have a user controlled order maybe, but maybe it doesn't really matter. Let's not worry about that yet. Okay, so, and like here, we don't need to update our select at all because we're just doing a select star. Here we did need to update it. And so I think that's everything. So I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this table. Commit. and restart the server, and it should recreate that table with the new column. We don't have migrations or anything like that set up. So, I'm just kind of doing this like this. Ideally, if this was like a production application right now, you wouldn't want to just be changing this schema in a way that would require users to delete their data in order to get the new schema changes. So that's why you would use a new migration where it's like altering the existing sites table to add the name column, and that could be run live on people's data and add that new column. But because we're just in a testing phase here, and it is a SQLite database as well, which doesn't work as well for migrations as some things do, we don't have that. I have done SQLite migrations before. It's not doable. So I might end up pulling it in to this project as well, but yeah, not too worried about that at the moment. In any case, now we actually have that name. We can update our home here to use that name, and that's going to make our select a lot nicer. See, now we can actually see which site we're selecting instead of just seeing that opaque UUID. Very good. The other thing though is I kind of want to have I want this app state to actually be persisted in local storage. And what's the best way to do that? Probably again in this home here, we would want to add something. And here is where we'll actually use a use effect. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to put this actually up here. Let's put it all the way up here. And what this is going to do is window.localstorage.set item. And we will call this Nanalytics app state. And this will be set to app state. And I think we need to stringify that. Stringify app state. And we could say like if app state, then do this. And this will accept app state as a thing, so it only runs whenever app state changes. And then we'll also need a way to read the app state from the local storage. I'm pretty sure there's some like existing hook libraries to probably make this easier, but I'm just going to implement it myself for now. And if that runs into problems, then I might switch up the approach. But the idea would be we want the value of the app state, and maybe so like we've got this default state here. And I might actually want to add a local storage check right here. So like const existing state equals window.localstorage.get item Nanalytics. And let's actually copy this and put this over here as a variable, like export const. We don't even need to export it. Just do const app state key is that. So we're going to get that. And we're going to say if there is an existing state, then use that. Otherwise, use the default state. And we're also going to move this use effect there as well. I think makes the most sense. And this is just state. And really so what we have here is like state and set state, right? It's actually these two things. And I could go ahead and add app state here, tell it what type it is. So now you can see these are like that. And then this whole thing is actually the value for this provider. This isn't happy because of this. Yeah. App state key. And that's just state. That's just state. Okay, like that. Should be good. And kind of an important thing here is we need to make sure that we're reading the app state before we're writing it, because as soon as this use effect runs, it's going to overwrite the state with whatever we have in the memory of our app, right? So if this runs, this set item runs before this get item, then it's actually going to just end up reading the default state and not whatever was saved. But I think doing it this way should work. So let's go ahead and give it a shot here. So if we refresh this, change this to localhost, and then refresh again, yeah, it automatically selects that. And it should work as well for like this. If I change that to 365, refresh, that setting is persisted. If we look over at our application here, we can see that right here. Cool, simple enough. Let's actually make a few commits here. I haven't been doing well on keeping up with my commits today. Let's do something here, add settings to mockup. And actually, let's move that so that a mockup is reflecting what the app is actually going to look like as well. More like this. And let's do adding the select component as like its own little thing. Add select component. And we'll have one here for adding the use sites hook. And that includes this. And that includes this. And it also includes this and this. Okay. Right, and I think that's the main stuff for that. Yeah, so add use sites hook and API route. Okay. So then we're going to have another one for adding site ID to our app state. We can get rid of that. Stage that. And I think also this. Well, it doesn't really matter exactly how this is done. Let's actually just do all of this together. Get rid of the unused use effect. Do all that. Do all that. And do that. And this, basically that whole file, this, not that, okay. So this would be add dropdown to select which site to show data for. Okay. And then we also are going to do this one, which is store app state in local storage. And we're going to do this one, which is add name to site table. Okie doke. Now we've got that done. Let's get back to our work here. So one of the things that I want to add is, like I mentioned, a panel that opens when you click this select button here, this button. And so let's go ahead and add that now. That's going to be where we configure the sites. And then we can finally get rid of that like testing stuff. So this is going to be a sheet, I think, right? It's like pops open on the side there. Yeah, a sheet. I think it's probably a good way to do it. We could have like a totally separate settings page. But I feel like just a simple sheet is probably the simplest way to go here. I don't want to have to deal with page routing or anything like that. If I can avoid it, and considering this app is almost entirely going to be in one page, I think I will be able to avoid adding something like React Router. So we're going to keep going on that assumption here. Okay, so let's just do add sheet component. And then we will use that sheet component in our homepage. So let's, again, just kind of copy this. And I think this usually, it can go at the bottom or the side or kind of wherever here. Let's just put it at the bottom from UI sheet, and then add all missing imports. And let's check our imports here. That should all be coming from UI sheet. Yep. Okay. Oh, but actually, so the sheet trigger, so let's actually not do it there. We will do it up here where we want the trigger to be in our DOM. And the trigger is going to be this. So I think we can just actually put that right in here. Let's see how that works. So now if I click on this, it opens the sheet, and you know, I can click the X to close it, right? Click the X, yeah. Or I can just click anywhere in this gray area of the page, and that also closes the sheet. We want the sheet to be wider as well. So with, yeah, it's on the sheet content thing. So that would be like here, I could do class name with Excel, let's say. So now if I click on that, I mean, it should be wider, right? Doesn't look any wider though, does it? Yeah, it's 363, whereas Excel is 276. So why is that? Is it this? Yeah. Do I have to do max width XL as well? I wonder. Didn't really help. It's kind of confusing. Okay, that did though. there's something about, so like if we look at our sheet here, sheet content, it has these default styles, right? And then there's also whatever styles I add. And they're joined together with this CN thing, which does this weird Tailwind merge logic that I don't really understand. And sometimes that gets kind of weird. So I think that's sort of what was going on here. But by explicitly saying using the same small modifier and max width that is used in the other thing, it causes us to actually override it properly. Or whatever, I don't know. But either way, that's about the width that I'd like to see it as. So now let's put our actual content in here. So we will call this settings. And, you know, let's actually look at this one here. So there's the header and then just divs. There's no like specific other thing that you would put in after the header. And we don't really need a description here either. So now under here we would have our form. And so we kind of need to think about what we want this form to look like. So for each site, there's going to be the name of the site, and we want users to be able to edit that. And then there's also going to be an array of host names that get associated with that site, and users are going to be able to, or they'll need to be able to create, edit, update, and delete those host names for each site, and also create, edit, update, and delete sites. So we sort of have an array of arrays editing form going on here, which is actually a bit of a complicated form. Let's see, I seem to recall there being some kind of form component. React hook form. Yeah, let's just go ahead and use this. So React hook form is actually a library that exposes hooks that can be used to manage a form more effectively, like Formic. If you're familiar with Formic, React hook form is a similar tool. And ShadCN has these form components that basically provide an sort of a pre-built set of user interface elements that work with that React hook form library automatically. So here we would have, and actually this is probably something I should put in a separate component. So let's do that. I'm going to make a new component here. We will call this sites, site form. Sure. Site form. So this will return something like this. Let's just start with the form. Form. And then inside there, we're going to have form fields for each site and for each site name and so on. So let's get our sites in here. So data sites equals use sites. And this is kind of a cool, let's not save that. A cool thing because we're using the same use sites component that we use here. But because of how TANSTACK query works, it's not going to do an additional query because we're calling this use sites a second time. So we can just use this use sites hook wherever we need access to the site data. We don't have to bother passing it through as a prop. So this way we can kind of minimize the need for the parent component to be aware of the data that the child component needs, because the child component can just use these hooks to access the data that it needs itself with no performance impact. Okay, so here we would have, sites.map something. And like in here, I mean, maybe there should actually be a separate form per site, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Does that make sense? I don't know. Let's just leave it all as one form for now. So sites.map site. So in each of these, we will have a series of things. There's going to be a form item for the name of the site. Let's just start there for now. So, and oh yeah, we need our form here. Use form. This is coming from React Hook form. It's where all the form like state and stuff is stored. So we have control. Isn't that what it's called? Yeah, control. Form.control. Why doesn't it like that? Oh, it's called form field, not form item. Okay, let's do a question mark there so that's not squiggly. So we have our control. We also need our name. And this would be a good example of where having separate forms per site would probably be good. But we could have this be something like, actually, let me see here. Let's look at form. It doesn't really have a lot of information there. Let's actually look at the React Hook form docs a little bit here as well. Kind of what I'm thinking of is, how do you have a form where there's multiple nested structures, right? Not just plain key values, but like a value that's actually an object that has some more keys in it and so on. Is there something special there, or does that just like kind of work? I wonder. Gosh. My eyes are kind of glazing over looking at all this. It's like so much stuff. I don't know. But in any case, I do want to add a schema here as well before we get into doing anything without it. So I think it's like resolver, and then there's like a Zod resolver. Like this, but with Zod. Zod resolver. Zod. Yeah, and then this would get called on a Zod schema. So in this case, the schema is going to be an array. And we need to import this from Zod v4. Let's do it like this. So this is an array of site objects. And we actually have the schema for site objects exposed here already, this site schema. So we use this schema in the back end, but now we can actually use the exact same schema in the front end, which is pretty cool. And so, okay, so here you can see, this is neat because it's actually showing me how this works with the types now that we've added that schema. So the name should be the index of the site, followed by potentially one of these properties. So we would actually need to extract the index here as well as the site. And then this would be, you know, like this. We could do index dot name. Let's just see how that works. And then we need to add a render, which like in this case, you know, is like this. Let's actually just copy this example here because a lot of it's going to be pretty similar. Let's copy the whole thing so we can format it. Okay. And then add all missing imports. Input. We don't have input installed yet. That'd be a good one to have. Input. Add that. Okie doke. And, you know, placeholder site name. I don't really need a description here, I feel like. And the message is going to be like if there's a validation error or something, it's going to go there. So we do want to leave that, I think. So now what happens? It's some weird panic. I've had that happen before where, especially it seems like with the Tailwind plugin, sometimes I get this panic on Windows. It's only ever happened on Windows. Oh, and then I actually think I need to plug that in here. Under my sheet, this would be like site form. Okay. Cannot read properties of null reading control. Right. I have no idea what that means. So obviously it's down here. It's trying to read form.control. Which should be fine. Eventually I'll address all of these. Button should not be nested in button and things, but I'm not too worried about that at the moment. Cannot read properties of null. So the form is null for some reason. That's what this is telling me. Why would that be null? One thing I could do here actually is values. I actually want to have be sites. If that works. I'm not sure if that works. Click. form. I'm just kind of curious to see what that logs here. Click. Okay, I mean, we have our form. It has controls. So maybe the issue is actually with this. What if we get rid of that just for a moment and comment that out? Still is not happy. Why not? What's going on here? React hook form. I guess one thing I could add to, I'm sure these don't really matter, but I could add the default value there. I don't think that's going to actually fix the problem though. Just to confirm, if I don't do this at all, let's just get rid of it. Okay, we're still getting that error. That's interesting. What is up with that? Let's see. So if I look at the quick start here, you know, it's pretty much what we expect. I wonder if there's some issue with the schema validation thing that I'm doing. Like if I comment this out, is it still going to complain? Yes, it does still complain. If I comment all of this out, does it still complain? No. Okay. So, but if I get rid of this, then it still complains. So it's almost like the form, whoops, that's not what I want. Thingy itself is like this. It's causing some kind of problem. Form equals form provider. Coming from React hook form. So this is form provider. Do I need to pass the control to this? It doesn't show that in the... Doesn't show that in the ShadCN examples here though. Maybe if I scroll down more, it'll explain it. Define a submit handler. Oh, okay. So they're doing that. Okay, let's do that then. Okay, and I probably should do, well, whatever. Cannot get property get field state. Okay. If I do .name, kind of bring this back to how it was. I wonder if that will work. No, that also doesn't work. And the other thing is here, let's actually get rid of values and set default values to sites. Okay. Use form context is null. Get field state, so it's not getting the form context. Why? So what? I have to put this form in here too? Why? I don't know. Just following the instructions, I guess. That's important, right? Even if it doesn't necessarily make sense. Oh, look at that. I mean, yeah. Okay. And I don't need the spacing. On submit. So, you know, that just, yeah. I don't really want to implement that yet, but I'll just put it in as a placeholder. And how does that look now? Still not happy. What are you not happy about? Just out of curiosity, if I comment that stuff all out, now it should at least not error. That's good. And let's actually add our button here as well, I guess. I'm sure that's not going to fix the error, but it's a good thing to have. Type submit. Save changes. Okay, and I mean the name says number.name. Form.control, render field, blah, blah, blah. So if I take this out, why is that doing that? So in the form label, it's doing use form field, right? And then this is calling use form context with get field state. And use form context is coming from React Hook form. So the thing that's confusing me is that form context should be being set by this. So why is it not working? I don't think there should be a problem with that. Well, for one thing, this sites.map business is probably not actually going to work well. This should, I feel like this is going to need to be mapping on the form data. Form dot get values dot map. Don't know if that'll fix it. It's not even a function. Why not? It should be returning an array of objects, right? Let's see. Form.getValues, empty object. Should this actually be values? I don't understand how this works. This isn't async, is it? No. How confusing. Well, maybe, so let's try and simplify this a little bit. What if the form is just for a single site? And then we have this. Instead of mapping over it, we just do it like this. And the name would just be name, which obviously we don't need these brackets around it anymore. And then that should, in theory, work. Okay, we're still getting that error though. I'm probably just missing something dumb. Form, form. Form field control, form control. What's going on here? Let's actually just return, do this. And just switch that to name. And if we look at the examples up here, there's resolver and default values and an on submit. Okay, what if I add the default values then? Default values, name, empty string. Still isn't working. Get rid of the class name. I don't need that, I know. So what's, why you no work? You know, why you no work? I mean, we've got this form provider. Let's look at the, okay, maybe this is why. I think this form needs to be imported from here. Yes. What a nuisance. I knew it was something stupid, and it was. Okay. Okay, so now let's actually fix this to actually be an array again and see if we can get that working how we originally meant it to. And name So again, let's do form dot, well, let's see here. Let's just see if we comment that out. If our get data thing is still just returning an object. Get values. It's not returning an array. It does feel like this might be better to do as just like a form for a singular site at a time. So let's just do that. Okay, so default values is just going to be name, empty string, and host names is an empty array. And let's get rid of this use sites thing for now. Okay, let's get rid of that for now. Okay, and then, so that's name. So then we would also have another one, which would be host names, right? Yeah. And this would be rendering a field. And so here we would actually do like something like field dot something, right? Let's get rid of this so we can maybe get some autocomplete going on in here. Oh, we don't even need those brackets, I see. Field dot value dot map host name index, need parentheses, and that's going to be this. So this field dot value, it doesn't know what that is. The form here, let's just do site. That's the type of the form, right? Types of property names are incompatible. What does that mean? ID, name, host names. ID, name, host names. Seems like it should be compatible to me. What if we just do like z.infer type of site schema, just out of curiosity? Yeah, still doesn't work. I wonder if that's due to the pre-transform. If I just do this, I'm curious if that error is going to go away. It does. Okay, so it's due to this pre-transform, which I think should be okay. We just kind of need to like tell it that that's okay. I don't know the best way to do that, but let's just leave it at that for now. Actually, if we just get rid of that, it should be fine. So kind of the reason that I did that in the first place is I was trying to get this field.value to actually know what type it is. Because like you can see your host names is listed as unknown for some reason. And again, I wish that wasn't like that. Almost makes me think I should have just a separate schema for that. Maybe I'll do that. I'll do like export const site schema client equals z dot extend, right? Or z dot merge, z dot object. I know it would be like this. Site schema dot extend host names z dot array z dot string. So now this one lacks that preprocessed thing. And then we could use that over here. And that should do it. And this needs to be type. Okay, so now it should know field.value is an array of strings. Yeah. And this is kind of saying we need to put it in these things. And then this needs to be wrapped in this thing. Okay. Host name. This would be site name. Get rid of the description. Don't really need that. Again, get rid of the description here. Okay. So yes, and I almost think, I don't really know how this works. So we've got our username. So this is like a site form for a single site. We almost, let's try this. Let's do site as a prop. Site. Default values is site instead. And then here we would do sites.map site. Site form key equals site.id, site equals site. Okay, so now if I click on this, I should see two, and they should have the two things in there. Obviously not pretty, but we're actually getting some values, which is good. So let's just try, let's go over here, update our on submit thing here to console.log. Values, I think go in here. Let's just look over here to confirm. Yeah. And that type is going to be site. So if I submit this, just click that, we get this thing, which makes sense. If I change this, it doesn't work. I kind of thought that might be the case. So I think we might actually put another form field inside this form field. Not totally sure, but I think that's what we want to do. Let's kind of copy this one up here. So this is actually going to be in this for loop thing. we're going to do that, and then we're going to do this. And then this is going to be index, or no, host names dot index. Right? Okay, so we can change it now without an error. If I submit it, it updated the host names. Awesome. Okay, so that's kind of working. Let me do a quick time check here. Okay, we still have time. I'd like to at least kind of get this form somewhat wrapped up, although we still have a ways to go on it yet. But okay, so we've got this form field here. And then we also need a way to delete that host name. So let's add a button. And just put an X there for the moment. And this would be on click. We're going to do field dot on change. Field dot value dot filter value not equals, or value dot ID not equals, or no, yeah, host name. I think that is a thing that might work. So if I click X on this, that goes away. If I click submit, the host names is empty. Yeah, so that does work. Cool. Looks weird. Again, not worried about that yet. I mean, really, so like this could be a div. Class name, flex, so that at least the X is kind of next to the other stuff. Still looks weird, but whatever. I could even put it in here maybe. Maybe. Is there a way to add like a with button? Just puts it next to it. Pretty simple. Let's actually try doing it like that. So let's put this in here. The only thing is we'll need to be careful to change this field to use this field. So this one I'm actually going to call subfield. Oh, okay. Form control expects only a single child. Is that what you're trying to tell me here? Or is it trying to tell me something else? Maybe this button needs to be outside of the form control and more like there. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't look any better, let's look at form control here for a moment. Form control. Okay, so we might be able to get away with doing something like a fragment in here. And then the input like that. That does work. And then if we did like class name, whoops, class name flex. Yeah, so that's kind of what I was expecting, hoping for. Not really ideal, but yeah, fine. Okay, so then we also need a way to add, right? So let's add that down here. So we don't need this flex here anymore. That can go away. And then in this host names field, we're also going to have a button to add. And, I'll just call it plus for now. And this is going to do field.value.push. And this will just have a name, empty string, or no. This is I keep forgetting the host name is just an array of strings. So that would just push another empty string on there. So now, I could do add, Let's do it like this, dot, field, empty string. Because the dot push doesn't actually return the value, right? We want to return a new value by adding the string to the array like that. So now if I do add, we get our second host name here. And, foobar.com. If I click submit, it should have both of the host names in there. Yeah, looks good. I mean, it doesn't look good, but it's working, right? That's what matters at the moment. And really these, I don't like the form label there very much. I want a form label up here. Host names. Yeah, so now the label is like above the host names. And you can add more host names, you can get rid of the host names. Oh, that's that's not good. Let's update this filter. So I tried filtering it by value, which is the simplest way to do it. But really, what we should be doing is more of a splice. Or a slice, I guess. Well, it's more of a splice. The thing about splice is it returns an element containing the array that was deleted. It doesn't actually return like the cleaned up array. I wonder if there's some better function for this. To spliced. I think that might be what I want. To spliced. Copies an array, removes elements, if necessary, inserts. Yes, perfect. And so we're going to start at index and delete 1, right? Let's just refresh this. So now if I add 3 of these, if I click X on the S1, well, I mean, I think it worked, but then it cleared the values of all the others, which wasn't what I expected. If I click X on example, yeah. Okay, so that is working, except that it's not retaining those other values, which is a pain in the butt. And the issue here is we're changing it based on the current value of field.value, which doesn't reflect any changes in the inputs, right? What if I'm kind of curious, what if I take this over here, actually out of that other form field? Does it do the same thing? I mean, it kind of makes sense that it's working that way. Let's see. Yeah, it does. Okay. Okay, let's put it back where we had it. Yeah, so, I almost wonder if we want to do this first. Does that make sense, or is that just weird? Okay, so let's add one, SDF, add one. Okay. No, it doesn't fix it. Okay. Well, that's not really ideal, but for the moment, it might be the best that we've got. There's definitely going to need to be some iteration on this form that has to happen. For now, though, let's actually implement the submit button as well. And let's actually go down here. Well, let's worry about that later. Okay, so let's go ahead and implement the submit button. In order to do that, we need to be able to edit sites, which isn't something that we've implemented yet. So we will add a new route, API sites ID, and oops, ID, and we'll do post. Or, I mean, it could be put, but whatever. The thing about post is browsers support post as a form action. I don't know if that's relevant here, but we'll just do it as post. And this is going to site ID equals, well, let's just do it like this. So this will be update site, update site, rec.params.id, rec.body. Then we need to implement this update or rec.json, right? That's what it is. And await. And then this needs to be async. Yeah. Okay, so we need to implement this update site function. We will do that down here. So let's, doesn't really matter, but let's just copy this. So we'll have update site. Actually, I might copy this from events over here. We should have an update event function. It's going to be very similar. This is update site and site ID and partial site. And this is site or null. I noticed too over here, we had, this is user event input. What's the difference? Oh, there is no script. So that is the value before the preprocess runs. I don't think that really matters here. Okay, so let's just do partial site. And this, you know, is going to be site schema instead of event schema. This we will import site schema again here. Okay. What are you complaining about? Valid data. So valid data here is this object. Names from JSON string. So I think the problem here is I need to actually have something where it's also like host names are json.stringify valid data.hostnames. And we really only need that if hostnames is being set. So we could do kind of a little trick here where it's like dot, 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 dot. Valid data dot hostnames. Then this. Otherwise null or just undefined. Type array is not assignable to type array of null. Type this is not assignable to type null. Why would it be null? Oh, it's just, yeah. It's just confusing, but basically it doesn't really get this bit. TypeScript doesn't, that is. Let's just do it like this. It should be okay. Okay, and it's complaining about ID now because, oh, I need a comma here. Okay. A little bit annoying. Kind of the nuisance here is that SQLite doesn't support JSON natively. It's just like a string. There is actually a JSONB type in SQLite, but it's still just represented as a string. You know, if you were to query for it, you get a string. If you update it, you can't set it to as a JSONB object or a JSON object in the SQLite driving library, at least the bun one. You need to coerce it to a string yourself. In any case, we've got our update site route here, and we just need to import this. And that should be basically fine. So now we need our on submit button to actually do something. And what I'm going to have this do, I'm going to have something where it's like const update site equals use update site. And I'm actually going to have a hook here that returns an update site function that it's going to call. Site.id values. And so now we need to implement this hook. And we'll kind of see why I'm doing it as a hook. Because it kind of shares some logic with some of these other TanStack query hooks. So we're going to return doesn't really matter, but I could return use memo maybe. Function, and this is going to await fetch /API /sites / let's do this with the syntax here. ID. This is going to accept an ID. Well, it doesn't really matter. The ID will actually be down here. ID string data partial site. And this will have body JSON.stringify data method post. And this is an async function. This use memo. Oh, I need my deps argument. I don't think there are any deps. Oh, use callback, not use memo. Use callback. Okay. But I also am going to want this to actually invalidate a thing. So we're going to need to get our query client. Use query client, this one. And then after the fetch, we're also going to do query client dot invalidate queries sites. Right? Or no, it's like this. Query key sites. Okay, so what this is going to do, it's going to update the site, and then it's also going to tell the query client, hey, any queries, any use query calls where the query key matches this site's should also be updated. So the front end will be automatically refetch that data to get the updated thing. And we'll kind of see what that looks like, hopefully. Let's do our import here. Okay. So let's see how well this works. So if I change this, I shouldn't call it username. That should be called site name. So if I change this to example.com2, or let's do localhost. If I change this to localhost 2 and click submit, you see how it updated over there as well? And the reason it did that is because, so we were able to send this update, and which appears to have worked. And then because we invalidated the sites query, it actually automatically reissued that query because it recognized that there were other things that needed that information. So just by doing that, we were able to keep the front end and the back end in sync. So it's important whenever we're updating stuff to invalidate the queries that depend on that as well. Okay. So the other thing that we will want here is probably a create and a delete site. Let's just go ahead and add the hooks for that now. Use create site. And this is going to be a post to sites without the ID. And we haven't implemented this yet, so, you know. And this, there shouldn't be an ID here. So we're going to do omit site ID. So the type of data is, anything in the site except for the ID. I think, wasn't there like a prettify thing? Oh, no, I think I would have to implement that. Anyway, won't worry about that at the moment. Okie doke, so that should be a thing. And then we can also add the delete site. And I'm actually going to use this one as a basis for that. Use delete site. And this will accept just the ID. And it will do method delete. And I guess this should be a dependency here. Yeah. Okay. Let's implement those functions on the server. So here we're actually going to add another method to this route, delete. And this will do delete site. And again, we're going to need to implement that. And then up here, we're going to add a post. And this is going to do create site. And we'll need to implement that too. And just because we know where we're going to put it, I'm going to go ahead and put those here, create site, delete site. So that way, once we define it, we're not going to need to remember to update that later. Okay. And let's, again, kind of copy from up here. Well, I mean, we have create event. I don't think we have any delete anything defined yet. So we'll have to write that one from scratch, but that's fine. Create site, data, site, return site, site schema. And you'll notice, for example, for the update site, it's a partial. For this, it's not partial, which is indicating, and we actually have that in the schema here as well. So if there's like a required field on the site, like the name, this is a required field. If somebody tries to create a site without that, the server is going to throw an error. And then insert into, got to update these imports. These are just some helper functions to basically, instead of me having to write ID, name, host names, and then update that each time I add a new field, we can just use these helper functions that kind of handle that automatically. This is complaining about something that I don't really understand. Again, it's probably the same thing as up here. Let's actually just copy this, get rid of the ID. And actually the ID is going to be a random UID. Not v5, just like that. And can I not import that from something? Why do I? From crypto. It's weird that it doesn't detect, like it doesn't tell me that I can import it, but then when I do it like this, it clearly has the types for it. I don't know exactly what's up with that kind of IntelliSense issue there. But in any case, this is kind of what we want. And, this site schema, I'm going to actually add a .omit ID true. And this is actually going to be an omit site ID. Yeah. Okay. So if I go back over here, That's good. Now we need to implement delete site, right? It's going to be kind of similar to the update site. So let's copy that, delete site, don't need any data. It's not going to return anything. Don't need that. Don't really need a result. And we would do like delete from table name, right? I can never remember the syntax for deletes. We don't really need the returning at the moment. Don't really need that for create site either, but we might in the future, so I'm just going to leave it. And this doesn't need to return anything. Delete from, right? That is how it works, right? I think so. Okay. Yeah, so now we've got our routes. We just need to add some things to call them. So let's do it like this. In our home page here, we would have, let's do div and then here we would have a button, delete site, on click, delete site. And this is going to come from use delete site. So delete site equals use delete site. And we'll have another one for use create site. Right. And this, I guess, is like this. Delete site, site.id. And then down here, we could have another button. Let's just copy this. Add site, create site. And here we'll just pass in some placeholder values. So we don't need the ID. We do need name, unnamed site, and host names, empty array. Right, so now if I open this up, you know, say I want to delete this example.com site, I should be able to click this button and it goes away. And again, we can see that like we refetched the new list of sites. I wonder, well, let's try add site first. Add site. That didn't work. What are you complaining about? Not null constraint failed site.id. I thought we explicitly set the ID here. Oh, this, okay, this actually needs, I need to add these values here like this. Because that is not part of the data. Okay, so now it should work. Yeah, got our new site. Wait, why did that example.com come back? Oh, because of the, yeah. I'm going to get rid of these as well now. Don't need them anymore. They're just going to confuse us. But this is something I'm curious about. So say I select example.com and I delete this site. So see how that just went to a nothing? It really should switch to something else. Let's see if we can make that happen. So if I recall, we have this thing here. So I might actually add another conditional in here. So not appstate.siteid or not sites.sum s.id equals appstate.siteid. So what this is saying is if there are some sites and either the app state site ID is not set or it's set to something, but that something is no longer in the sites array, then it's set to the first thing of the sites array automatically. So now if we say delete this unnamed site, that should switch to localhost. Yeah, and it did. Awesome. Okay, I mean, we're making some progress here. Let's commit this, and these. Add form input label components. And then we can, let's get rid of the use memo import. Can do add hooks and routes. Guess I don't need that either. Okay. Add hooks and routes for creating, updating, and deleting sites. Okay, and then here we're gonna do add sheet for managing sites from the dashboard. Okay, so I mean, we've got our main stuff going on here for the sites, I think. You can create, update, and delete them. There's still that issue where, like, if I change this and then click plus, oh, that actually did work. What if I change this and then click X? Yeah, that issue. How come it worked for the plus but not the X? See, that time it didn't work for the plus. What if I click away from it and then click plus? No. Not entirely sure. I'm sure there's some way of handling this better. Because again, I mean, the issue being that this field.value is not updated immediately, I believe because these other form fields are uncontrolled. I wonder if we switch it to use a controlled form, if that's even possible. I don't think that's really possible with these components, though. I think it's possible with React hook form, controlled inputs. But I don't know if it's possible with these form control things. Form field, form item, form control. So form field, it does have a controller, I guess. So maybe they are controlled. And then over here, I wonder if I did something like, I wonder, let me just try something here. Let's try making this a component. And I'm just going to do a little bit with this and then wrap up for the day if I can't get it to work. Remove hostname button. This is going to be its own component. And we'll do return. And here we're going to do const field equals use form field. What is get field state used for? Yeah. Use form field. And so there's invalid, is dirty, is touched, is validating, error, ID, name, is there like a value? There's not really like a value. What if I do form, use form? It's not really what I want either, though. I want to use the form from the form provider. Let me see. What is available on form here? So there's form state, get field state, get values, reset field, set value. I feel like there's probably something here. Maybe I should be using form.formState. Like, let's put this back up here. Where did I take it from? Here. And then what if I did like form dot form state dot okay, so this just has the state. It doesn't have the values. If I do like get values, I think there's a way to pass in, yeah, a name. I wonder, I mean, it's probably not going to really. This would be host names. I doubt that'll really change anything. But it's always kind of hard to tell with these form libraries, like what they're actually doing. So let's set those to something. So now if I click X on this, oh, it did keep it. Did that fix it? Ooh. Yeah, okay. Okay. Sorry. Let's do the same thing down here. Yeah. And if I submit that, it's got the things. Yes. Okay. And the other thing is I'm actually going to update the schema. Wait, why is this? Where's my error? Oh, I don't need this anymore. And let's clean up our imports, organize imports. I'm actually going to update the schema here as well to say that the host names should never be empty. Min1. And the same thing here. And just by doing that, it should now, let's refresh and make sure we've got the latest stuff. If I try and submit it with an empty one, it should not work. I mean, it didn't work, but I expected it to give me a client-side error. Right? Well, whatever. Seems like that's not. Oh, maybe this has to be there too. Yeah. I don't really like this schema duplication aspect. It just makes it easy to make mistakes. Like I just did. Now if I get rid of that and click submit, I get an error. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of what I expected. So that's good. But if I delete that and submit, then it works. And, this submitting, it's not obvious that anything happened. Like, obviously, there's some improvements we need to do there, but I'm not going to worry about that for today because it's about time to wrap up. At least it works. That's what matters. So let's do this. We can say fix. Add, remove buttons using current form state instead of field.value. And ensure name, host name cannot be empty. Hi, Joshua. Sorry, you just got here right as I'm about to wrap up, though. Welcome to the stream. Goodbye. Let's see here. So we're going to do a push. Oh, and yeah, I think that's going to be it. Let me just double check my to-do list here, see if there's anything I need to check off there. Not really. I didn't really add to-dos for these server pages, so, these editing that I've been working on in the site forum. So yeah, nothing to check off there. I think we're about ready to wrap up. Thanks all. Have a good one. See you next week.